Ghost Shelter Secrets. How World War II camouflage made soldiers vanish from thermal eyes. They weren't hiding in the dark. They were hiding from heat. And, that difference is everything. In the age of thermal drones and infrared cameras, disappearing isn't about shadows anymore. It's about temperature. And here's the wild part. Long before thermal drones even existed, soldiers in World War II were already cracking the code. What they built back then can still make modern sensors struggle today. This is the ghost shelter secret they never taught in textbooks. Welcome back to 0 Hour. World War II. Let's cut straight to the good stuff. Why thermal vision sees what eyes can't. Thermal cameras don't care about colour, paint or camouflage patterns. They see heat. Every human body glows at around 37 degrees Celsius. Against cooler ground or air, that glow stands out like a flare. In modern warfare, this makes hiding incredibly difficult. But during World War II, survival, it really forced innovation. Soldiers didn't know the word thermal, but they understood heat transfer instinctively. They learned that if you control heat, you control visibility. The real enemy was heat leakage. World War II field shelters weren't just holes in the ground. The smartest ones were heat traps in reverse. The biggest giveaway wasn't movement. It was warmth escaping into cold air. Soldiers noticed something simple. A shelter that stayed dry, insulated and earth-covered, stayed closer to ground temperature. That meant less contrast. Less contrast meant harder detection, even with today's thermal tech. This is where the ghost effect begins. Earth was honestly the ultimate cloaking device. You see, soil acts as a thermal buffer. It heats up slowly and, cools down slowly too. World War II engineers and infantry alike figured out that covering shelters with thick layers of earth did more than just stop shrapnel. It actually equalized temperature. A properly buried shelter didn't, glow hot or cold. It blended right in. In winter, body heat was absorbed and spread out. In summer, the earth blocked solar heating. The shelter became, thermally boring. And honestly, boring is invisible. That's why dugouts were made deep, roofed with logs, and piled high with soil. Not for comfort, really. For thermal stability. Wood, not metal, made the difference. Metal is a thermal snitch. It heats fast and cools fast. World War II shelters avoided exposed metal whenever possible. Wood was the material of choice. Logs, planks, even layered branches. Wood doesn't conduct heat well. It slows the transfer. That means the heat from inside never spikes the outside surface temperature. To a thermal sensor, that surface looks natural, like dirt, like a fallen tree, like nothing worth noticing. Modern thermal camouflage often rediscovered this lesson the hard way. Here's where it gets clever. Shelters needed air, but open vents leak heat. World War II designs solved this using long, angled ventilation shafts. The air moved, but the heat didn't rush straight out. By the time warm air reached the exit, it had cooled and mixed with the surrounding ground temperature. Some vents were even routed horizontally before exiting, forcing heat to disperse into the soil. No visible heat plume, no thermal signature screaming humans inside. The power of dampness. Dry shelters are comfortable, sure, but slightly damp shelters are, well, invisible. Moist soil absorbs heat more effectively than dry soil. Soldiers noticed that shelters built in moist ground stayed cooler in summer and warmer in winter. That moisture acted like a thermal sponge. Heat spread out instead of concentrating. This wasn't theory. It was survival knowledge. Units that mastered this lasted longer. Units that didn't, well, they stood out. Fires were absolute killers on the battlefield. Just one mistake could erase all your careful camouflage in an instant. Fire, yeah, even a small cooking flame, would heat up the materials around it and leave behind a thermal scar that lingered long after the flames died down. World War II field manuals, they specifically warned against lighting fires near shelters. It wasn't just about the smoke giving you away, but also because the ground that had been warmed by a fire stayed warm for hours and hours. Even after the flames were gone, the area would still glow on thermal scans. So smart units cooked their meals far away from where they slept. Sometimes they ate cold food when necessary. Survival always took precedence over comfort. In these situations, the shape of what you left behind mattered even more than its size. Flat roofs stayed hidden. Curved roofs betrayed heat. You see, a flat, earth-covered roof distributed warmth evenly. Meanwhile, a rounded structure concentrated it. That's why proper shelters looked boring from above. No angles, no ridges, just ground that happened to breathe honestly. Even today, thermal operators look for unnatural shapes before anything else. Why this still fools modern tech? Thermal drones are powerful, but, well, they still rely on contrast. World War II shelters minimize contrast. They didn't fight sensors. They starved them of information. A human inside a thermally stable shelter doesn't really stand out. The ground, well, it just looks like ground. The shelter, honestly, becomes nothing more than background noise. And that, my friends, is the real secret. Not invisibility. No, not at all. It's normality. These are lessons that modern survivalists quietly reuse, time and time again. Modern military forces, even today, still borrow these ideas. Things like earth coverage, insulation layers, heat diffusion, and long ventilation paths. Back in World War II, they didn't have thermal cameras, but they built shelters that, quite by accident, countered them. That's not just luck. That's practical physics, learned under fire. And it proves something important. Advanced technology doesn't always beat simple principles done right. Why this matters now? In a world obsessed with drones and sensors, the old ways still whisper warnings. control heat, respect materials. Blend with the environment instead of fighting it. World War II shelters weren't glamorous. They were smart. They turned soldiers into ghosts without anyone realizing how. That's the kind of history 0 Hour World War II exists to uncover. Not just what happened, but, why it still works. If this opened your eyes, don't let the signal fade. Subscribe to 0 Hour World War II. Share this with someone who thinks modern tech invented invisibility. And stay sharp. History always has one more secret waiting in the dirt.